Hello everyone, Lore Master of Sotek here, and I'm trying to get back into things, and one of the things that I used to be doing that I'd like to get back to doing, just because, I don't know, it's fun, is just talk about what's kind of going on in the hobby spaces that I observe and pay attention to and enjoy, participating in, and just kind of talk about what's going on, because a lot of the times I'll be on streams or whatever and talking about random nonsense, and people will hear me rambling about something I'm excited about and be like, oh, that sounds kind of cool, or I wonder what he's talking about. So I figured, hell, let's just, get back to doing that. I mean, it just kind of makes for sort of an easy weekly thing. And so without further ado, let's get into it. So as far as what's going on in the various hobby spaces of Warhammer these days, I'm just going to be focusing pretty much on Games Workshop / tabletop related things, just because there's not a lot going on in the Total War space right now. We're in a little bit of a quiet waiting zone, I guess. I don't know. You know what I mean. But in any event, the Amazons are coming out to Blood Bowl. Hopefully, when this video is edited, there should be some images and stuff in the background so you can see what I'm talking about. But I'm actually really excited for the new Amazon team, because I really like to see the direction that Blood Bowl is taking the Amazons in, because it gives me hope for how the Amazons might be reinterpreted or come to life in either Total War Warhammer one day, perhaps, or at the very least, Warhammer the Old World, because the Amazons are very much around during Warhammer the Old World. So it would be great to see them go from being kind of a niche, barely mentioned thing to being more of a playable faction and a culture again, because there is so much there. They kind of are the human culture that exists in the jungles of Lustria. They're the South American human race that we really have to explore and mess around with and stuff. And there are, of course, some very interesting different interpretations of how the Amazons function and exist. Most notably, the two biggest interpretations are, one being that the Amazons are sort of these descendants of the Norscan Valkyries, which, when the Norskins came to Lustria and set up the settlement of Skeggi, originally many of the Norskins felt strongly that the women shouldn't be continuing their career as warriors, because some of the women that were with the tribe were Valkyries, which are these really powerful, terrifying warrior women who, just like the name implies, were super badass elitists. And were very, very skilled with numerous types of weapons and combat styles. But the Norskins were like, hey, we're trying to set up a civilization here in a very dangerous new environment. We kind of need all hands on deck for civilizing this land, even in a Norscan sense of civilizing, as opposed to just continuing what we've been doing. And the Valkyries told them to get stuffed. They weren't going to lay down their weapons and become housewives or what have you. So they departed, and they made their way south along the coastline until they ended up at Amazon Isle, and there they discovered something. They found some sort of secret left behind by the Old One Rig, who is a very mysterious Old One. We do know that she is one of the Old Ones. We have some texts with the Lizardmen kind of speaking about her a little bit, and the Lizardmen found Rig to be very confusing, which is why I love the Amazon so much, because Rig was the only Old One that was associated with sex, as in male female, the word sex, not, well, I don't know. Anyway, moving on. Rig was the Old One who was noted for being in charge of things that, the female aspects of creating life. And to the Lizardmen, it's very confusing, because the Lizardmen do not have a sex. They don't have gender. To the Lizardmen, they simply are. They are creatures that are essentially created in spawning pools, and they are created by these almost extremely sophisticated science fiction machines, as opposed to being born naturally. It seems Rig was the Old One who understood the more natural way that life is created, as far as more advanced life forms and things like mammals and stuff. But because of that, the Lizardmen were sort of disconnected from her and have not continued on her legacy, her rites, her rituals, and do not have her knowledge anymore. And for whatever reason, Rig was set up on Amazon Isle, or what's come to be known as Amazon Island. And these Valkyries discovered these secrets, and what exactly happened after that point isn't exactly known. what seems to line up in the two different versions of the myth, which I'll talk about the second one in a moment, is that, of course, the Amazons discovered some way of not necessarily immortality, but very long life, and a way to maintain their strength and youthfulness throughout life while still being human. They're still fundamentally human. And so the Amazons, they set up shop, they created many cool weapons and fighting styles. One of my favorites is kind of seen on this Blood Bowl team, where they've got these gauntlets with the big razored claws coming off of them, and they just look super badass, and they're very strong, and they live in a culture, they live in an environment that's full of all sorts of dangerous predators, so they have developed fighting styles and ways of war based on observing and battling against many of these animalistic predators, which has led to us getting jaguar warriors. I'm trying to remember, there are 4 types. I want to say it's jaguar warriors, piranha warriors, serpent warriors, and eagle warriors, I think, are the 4 different types, so to speak. But I love the idea, and they go out on raids to not only gather supplies for themselves, but they go out on raids to capture men and bring them back to the island so they can use them to continue on their own culture and stuff, which is a really interesting flip on how we tend to see a lot of raiding cultures being, typically masculine or male cultures, but in this case it's a women culture, which I don't know, I just really like the idea. But the other version, which I'm significantly less fond of, is that the Amazons are actually a completely different race. They're not really human, they just look human, and they were actually created by Rig on Amazon Island, and they are these immortal women so they don't die except for in battle, and they basically have access to Old One levels of technology, so they quite legit have many weapons that you would associate with like the Eldar of Warhammer 40,000. So they have, I think they're called like shuriken cannons or shuriken guns or something, but they're like these guns that shoot these what would kind of look like little beads of light that will just absolutely destroy you. And they have like laser weapons or plasma rifles or something. But I've never liked that idea because I think it's too much for fantasy. I understand like the Skaven having some like lightning type weapons, but they're also like extremely unreliable and due to explosions and stuff like that. And of course the Lizardmen have, I guess, what you could call laser weapons, but they're entirely based on like redirecting laser beams from the sun and stuff like that. So I really hope we're going to see the first version of the Amazons, not the second version. And this version for Blood Bowl seems to be more based on the first version, where they are human women who have simply adapted to live in a difficult environment and have found great success as a new culture. And they have a lot of snake themes. They have serpent priestesses. Rig, it's not really clear if Rig herself had anything to do with serpents, but we know that Kara had a lot to do with serpents, and Kara is kind of considered the most powerful or influential of the Amazon priestesses. Kara is like the mightiest of the serpent priestesses. There was once like a lore of the serpents, and they've held on to a lot of that serpent iconography, and there's a really interesting relationship between the Amazons and the worshippers of Sotek, as well as the Amazons and the Lizardmen in general, usually allies, but not always, because they do have some different interpretations. But yeah, I just really like it. Furthermore, we do have star players coming out that I'm very excited to see. The most notable, which of course I dedicated a whole video to when he was announced, is Boa Constrictor is finally coming to release. And Boa Constrictor is a snake man of Lustria. I have heard other people be like, oh no, he's a snake man for Koresh, but I've yet to see a single shred of evidence about that. Maybe that will appear in some of the new book that's coming out, because basically they release these little journals that are advertised like they're weekly, like they're sports weekly issues, but they're essentially like the rules and lore updates for all the new stuff. I think I might actually pick this one up because I'm so curious about Boa Constrictor and what his deal is and who he is, where he came from and everything. But I do love his design, and I do think he is a very strong likelihood to kind of represent what we might see from the Naga of Koresh, though I imagine they will be a much more horrific version. He's basically just a big snake that has arms, whereas I imagine the Naga are going to be much more horrific looking. But I'm curious if he has any relationship to the Naga of Koresh, or if he's basically just a very exotic species that the Amazons discovered in Lustria. We also have another star player being, I forget what her name is off the top of my head, but she's basically a swamp witch or a hag witch of the Amazons. She's an extremely old woman who has like a lot of really powerful knowledge and is, I think, heavily hinted to have magical abilities. And she's covered with frogs and has a really cool model, but she's just like, you know, kind of the typical like old hag, but when you really look at her, you realize that she is still like ripped, like she has scary, terrifying muscles. And she also, the most prominent frog on her cracks me up because the one on her shoulder is that frog that there's a lot of YouTube videos of. They have like this little squeak they do to intimidate people. It's like their war cry, but it's like the most adorable squeak in the universe, and it's just funny. And then, of course, last we have Glottal Stop. Glottal Stop is a Kroxigor that has been hanging around the Amazons, or they're the ones that found him. And Glottal Stop is actually extremely young. I think he's only like 16 years old or something for the Blood Bowl timeline. Granted, Blood Bowl lore tends to be very goofy, but there are a lot of really interesting snippets to be found. And Glottal Stop is a very interesting Kroxigor design. He's very, very different from the typical Kroxigors that we've been seeing Games Workshop working on. Most notably, he has a very different body shape. He has much more of like a simian shape where he kind of has these big gorilla arms and he almost seems to have kind of a gorilla stance. He also has like a very large neck frill. And then he has much more of a angular head, or like a longer head. He kind of reminds me more of, I honestly think that he better represents the, at least to me, I think he looks more like the Total War interpretation, except for he has more of like an ape-like upper body. So he is a little different from them. But I think the head shape is a little more crocodilian compared to the other one, but I don't know. It's hard to say. His tail also seems to be kind of more of a normal tail design, similar to the Total War design, unlike the regular Kroxigor we've seen for Blood Bowl, where they have clubbed tails, more like the traditional Kroxigor from Tabletop and Fantasy. But I'm really curious to see what they're going to do. I do like the neck spikes, though, or the spikes he has coming out of the bottom of his jaw. The Total War Kroxigors are really lacking a lot of the more interesting, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, accents, I guess, compared to many of the others. Anyway, that's enough on Blood Bowl news. I actually really need to start getting into Blood Bowl. Like, I love a lot of the new models. I love the Lizardman team. I love the Kroxigor. I love the Amazons. I love the like Boa Constrictor and all that stuff. So I need to start playing. I assume my local hobby stores have players, but I haven't really been looking into it. In any event, Cursed City is back. So kind of just jumping into the next thing, Cursed City, it's an extremely fun board game. I really wish I had a regular group of people to play with. I love my IRL friends, but they are not really into a lot of the stuff that I'm into when it comes to like board game type things. Like it kind of feels like I'm torturing them, trying to force them to play a lot of the more difficult or longer lasting board games. So I own a fully painted set of Cursed City, but I don't really have anyone to play it with, which is a real damn shame because it is extremely fun. But Cursed City is back. They finally fixed the stupid garbage shipping issues they had. I still think that was one of the biggest fuck-ups by Games Workshop, and frankly, they should be ashamed of themselves for how they handled the Cursed City incident, because they basically just removed it from their stores without saying anything. So, like, I would highly recommend picking up the game because it's very fun to play, but at the same time, I kind of feel weird recommending it because they did such a shit job of handling Cursed City that, like, I don't know, it kind of feels bad recommending it because I would totally not blame anyone for not having any faith in Games Workshop to do right by their customers. Like, they just drop the ball whenever they get the chance. But in any event, I don't think that's going to happen again. I will be honest. I do, from all the kind of sleuthing around and digging I did, it seems to have been a significant shipping issue to do with a company that was the people they relied on to create much of the board game aspects of the game apparently was like a Chinese company or something, but it was someone that drowned during the pandemic and basically went bankrupt. And so GW was kind of left holding the bag, and they finally seem to have resolved the issue, and hopefully they learn from their mistake and won't fuck up again. But not only is Curse City out, but they have also released an expansion, which is Curse City Night Wars. I personally will be picking up Curse City Night Wars, and I'm also going to have to find a new painter to hire to paint the things that I'm missing, because Curse City Night Wars actually not only continues the story of Curse City and is an expansion, but it adds in what happens after you beat the base game, as well as some new bad guys. I believe it adds the Fellbats, the new Fellbat enemy as a generic enemy type. It also adds in a generic vampire lord, and then it brings on 3 new special characters, being Radikar the Beast, which is after Radikar is defeated by the Curse City heroes, and it also brings on 2 of the Soul Blight special characters that were revealed with the new book, being the rat guy, who actually is from Ulfenkarn, seem to have returned to the Curse City, as well as the Blade, which is this really, really creepy, awesome vampire who carries around like a mask. But yeah, maybe I don't know, maybe I could finally find a group to play. Warcry has a bunch of really exciting news coming out. Most notably, Warcry is releasing some really interesting warbands. I know there is a Seraphon or Lizardman warband coming specifically to Warcry that I am extremely excited for. All they've revealed so far is the Chameleon Skink, which looks absolutely gorgeous as a sculpt. I'm really hoping there's a Croxagore in the set, or some kind of new Lizardman, as far as like, listen, we've gotten a lot of Skinks and we've gotten a lot of Saurus. I don't need Skinks. I don't need Saurus. Actually, that's not true. I could use some regular Saurus, but I don't need any more Skinks, and I don't need any more goddamn Saurus Old Bloods. Please, CA, no, or CA, Games Workshop, no more of those. Give me Croxagores, give me Saurus Warriors, give me Saurus Cav. Like, I don't need any more goddamn Skinks. Like, the Skink sculpts have held up pretty well. It's everything else that's really ugly and out of date. So hopefully they can get off their ass and really give us something special. Because I'll tell you, if they release a really gorgeous Seraphon warband, I'm getting into Warcry. Like, the time has come. But the core rulebook is dropping, which makes it a lot easier to get into. Because I don't know, I'm not a fan of buying box sets generally. It's just too much stuff and I don't like painting. It's not enjoyable for me most of the time. So I prefer just to get rulebooks. That way I could just kind of play. I also forgot to mention that Curse City did have a book that came out with it, and they're releasing the softback version. I don't know if it comes with the bonus hero that the hardback came with. The hardback book gave you an additional character to play with. I think they'd be dumb not to include that for the softback, just to make a little better of a purchase. It is a good book. It's fun. It wasn't what I wanted. I was really hoping the Curse City book was going to cover the events of the game, and that's not what it is. The Curse City book is more like a mystery book, like slightly horror themed mystery book that leads up to the events of Curse City. So if you're really, really into the game and you really want to get in kind of like a narrative mindset to play it with your friends, then yeah, I'd recommend picking it up, the softback, and reading it. And if it comes with the 8th character, then I would also very much recommend it, because the 8th character is actually very fun. Speaking of books, the Empire at War omnibus is coming out, which includes books by Dan Abnett, Nick Kime, and Darius Hinks, all fantastic authors when at their best. And, you know, it's just another omnibus. The more omnibuy they gave us for Warhammer Fantasy, the happier schoolgirl that I am. Finally, last, I think, when it comes to like regular book news, there are 2 new big AOS books that they're talking about. There is the Hammers of Sigmar First Forge, which I just frankly don't really care about, because it's purely about Stormcast, and it's about the Hammers of Sigmar Stormcast, who are like the most basic of the basic Stormcast. I'm sure the book will be fun. It's by author Richard Strachan, which I'm not familiar with him. I might pick it up. You know, I'll probably give it a chance, though I've got such a long list of books I need to read, probably not anytime soon. But the book I'm extremely excited about is they're releasing a hardback book called Grombrindle, Chronicles of the Wanderer by David Geimer. and I have not been this excited for a Black Library book in a very long time. Oh boy, I am super excited for this book. So David Geimer already wrote a 6-part series about Grombrindal that was contained in the White Dwarf books. I think it came out about a year ago, and basically every month they would, for 6 months straight, there were Grombrindal short stories. At least I think it was 6 months straight. I can't remember if there was any breaker week or breaker months, but it was a 6-part series that basically followed stories of Grombrindal and Grugni across the mortal realms, and basically explained what Grugni's been up to, where Grombrindal has been, what happened to him at the end of the end times, and his return into AOS. And it was amazing. Like, I know this sounds ridiculous, but like, I don't think I get to talk about as much how emotional I can get reading books, because I really get into books and I just love them. And the Grombrindal stories by David Geimer legit pulled at my heartstrings so many times. It was such a beautifully written love letter to fans of the dwarfs from Warhammer Fantasy who've really been starving throughout most of Age of Sigmar. And the fact that he's now going to be doing a full novel on top of it, which includes on the cover a brand new design of Grombrindal that I am praying to whatever gods are listening means that we are getting Grombrindal as a playable character in Age of Sigmar, and he's going to be leading a new Dwarden faction. There's been so many rumors about a third Dwarden faction, or like the Dwardens unifying into a new faction. There's been a lot of, which is definitely not happening because we've already gotten the new 3rd edition book for Fyreslayers, and Caradron, I'm sure, will be not too distant in the future. But I really hope we're getting a third Dwarden faction, and I hope that Grombrindal is going to be the new Dwarden High King, the first High King of the Dwarden in this new age, because he is the original first High King of the dwarfs. So I'm so excited for this book. I can't wait to see what's in it. David Geimer is legit probably my favorite, or at least in my top 2 favorite Black Library authors in the modern age. I love his work. So I'm very, very excited for this book. I can't wait for it to come out. Moving on to Underworlds. Underworlds is an extremely fun game. One of the things that breaks my heart all the time is the video game, because it's very good, but it just doesn't, I think, have the player base to really support the devs releasing as much content as the game needs. Because it's kind of one of those games where, because it doesn't really have enough content, not that many people seem to play it, and because not that many people seem to play it, it's not really able to generate more content. You know what I mean? So it's kind of a vicious cycle. And because the Underworld warbands are gorgeous, but I also don't really have like an in-person group to play with. It kind of seems to just be my curse a lot of the time. But they revealed 2 new warbands who look absolutely amazing. So we have the Gnarl Spirit Pack, who seem to be some Gurite. They're basically like Norscan barbarians of Gur. Obviously, they're not called Norskins because there is no Norska in AOS. I can't remember off the Dark Oath. The Dark Oath are basically like the Marauders of Chaos, and so there is a new Marauder warband essentially, and they look fantastic. I mean, they look like Norskins that don't live in as snow heavy of an environment, but they look like fantastic Chaos Marauders. They're absolutely gorgeous. One of them is a shaman who looks fantastic and would be perfect for any like Warhammer Fantasy Norscan or Warriors of Chaos army that wanted a Chaos Shaman. He would fit in perfectly. And then they've got 3 warriors. One guy, you got a big guy with a hammer who just he looks like he's kind of transitioning into being a Chaos Warrior and has all sorts of cool little trophies and some really thick armor. And just that hammer is huge. And then there are 2 warriors, one of which is wearing a really interesting mask. I'm not really sure what it is. It almost kind of looks like some kind of bug creature, which to me makes me wonder if it's one of the silent people of AOS, which are an insectoid race that we know they're around. We just haven't got to see them really yet. We've only caught glimpses of them. And then there's, I think it's a woman. I can't tell if it's a dude or a chick, but really classic, like twin axe warrior who's got a really nice mix between like leather armor and heavy armor. which looks fantastic. But then the far superior warband, because these two are actually releasing together in a set, are the Sons of Valmore. And the Sons of Valmore, my God, Games Workshop has undeniably perfected the art of creating skeleton minis. There's just no other way to say it. They have finally figured out how to make, not even joking, perfect skeletons. These are the best looking skeleton minis I have ever seen in my life. And the Sons of Valmore just look absolutely incredible. And the thing I really like about them is that they're very heavily armored skeletons. It's essentially a Graveguard warband. They're not regular skeletons, I suspect. They are heavily armored skeletons because they're all wearing plate and chainmail. Like these guys look decked out. And they also have a figure who has a crown who's like pointing, and he just looks amazing. And the stances are so dynamic, and they look great. I love them. One of my favorite designs that I've seen for Underworlds. I kind of want to pick these guys up just to use them in something. I don't think I would play them personally in Underworlds. I really, really enjoy, like if I was going to be playing Underworlds, I'd probably be playing the Seraphon or the Night Haunt, but they look fantastic. Moving on, the last kind of big updates is for those of you who are into Age of Sigmar, there are a bunch of new books coming out. The Disciples of Tzeentch, who from what I've heard have a pretty good book. I haven't gotten any of the specifics yet. I'm sure I'll tune into AOS Coach to watch some of his videos to figure out what's going on with them. Their book is going on pre-order as of today, or 2 days ago, Sunday. So they're coming out this upcoming Saturday. And then in the very near future, we are going to have the Lumineth Realm Lords coming out onto the tabletop, as well as the Sons of Behemat and the Ogre Maw tribes. And there is a lot of hope around all of these new groups, bringing a lot of excitement to the tabletop. Personally, I am very, very much hoping the Lumineth Realm Lords get absolutely slapped and brought into a new world order. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of the way they play the last times I fought them. Granted, that was like 6 months ago. So I'm really hoping that they're going to be made more fun to play against, as well as more fun to play. Because they're kind of one of those warbands where it feels like they have to play a very specific way. And not only is it probably not that much fun to play, but it's not fun to play against. And they also just have way too many, they have too much shit going on. Their book needs to be simplified. I want them to be good, but I want them to be simplified and not be so antagonizing to both play and play against. And then, of course, we don't know anything about the ogres yet, but the new Sons of Behemat book, I think, is looking absolutely incredible. I'm extremely excited for it. King Broad has to be the most impactful and exciting reveal of 3rd edition. One of my biggest things that I absolutely love is when a character that has been set up for a really long time finally comes to fruition and is made playable, and that is what they're doing with King Broad. King Broad was introduced way back in the early days of 1st edition. He showed up during part... Oh gosh, I want to say he showed up during part 3, which was God Beasts of the very first Age of Sigmar campaign, which was called the Realm Gate Wars. He showed up as the King of the Sky Titans. They're not related to the Sky Titans of Warhammer Fantasy. They share the exact same name, but they're not the same at all. But King Broad was a very cool character. He had like a really cool design, and I loved him, and I wanted him to be a special character. But a lot of people were like, nah, he's a regular Gargant. He's not a Mega Gargant, so it wouldn't make sense. But then he started getting really big and scary after Behemat was killed, just like all the other Gargants. So he became a Mega Gargant. They talked about him in the Sons of Behemat book that released in 2nd edition, but he wasn't playable, which broke my heart. But he did get a lot of time. And they talked about, there's a lot of build up to speaking about how he wants to become the new Behemat. Like he wants to step into that role and basically take the role of his progenitor. He wants to become the new Behemat. And he has like this really terrifying hammer and stuff. And there's been a lot of like little bits and pieces about a lot of the Mega Gargants trying to become the new king of the Mega Gargants. There's been some notable story threads throughout 1st and 2nd edition about people trying to replace him. There was a notable Gargant who was the Forces of Destruction tried to set up as the new Behemat, which was a trio of brothers that appeared during the Broken Realms saga, and they ended up failing because although they were working with I forget what his name is, new Grimgor Ironhide, I forget what his name is off the top of my head, Skragroth the Loon King, which is basically new Skarsnik, except for he's better than Skarsnik. I know heresy, but it's true because he's actually a wizard, which Skarsnik kind of should have been. What is his name? Oh gosh, whatever, you know who I'm talking about. It's like Grimgor Ironhide if he was on a wyvern. But the two of them tried to set up one of the Mega Gargants to be the new big guy, but he ends up being denied by the combined forces of the Stormcast Eternals and the Fire Slayers, which was really interesting because it felt like they were trying to set up Destruction to be the big bads for 3rd edition, which is correct, but then it kind of felt like they didn't pull the trigger, only for them now to be pulling the trigger, which was really cool, with a character that is way more established. So anyway, that's enough rambling from me. That's kind of everything that's going on in the hobby space. As you can tell, I'm not really just going to talk about just the reveals and then make it like a 5-minute thing and move on, because I think that would be stupid, and you can literally just watch any channel. I want to talk about why I'm excited about all these things. So hopefully this was interesting. If y'all are like, yeah, this is cool, we'd like to see more like this, let me know, because that would be like good news for me and make me feel like, oh yeah, let's try and do this on a regular basis. Or, you know, do you think this is too long, or it's too stupid, or it needs to be cut down? Like, just let me know. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you around. Thank you. Bye.